Good evening and welcome to the Utah Republican Party 4th Congressional District primary debate. I'm Boyd Matheson, opinion editor at the Deseret News, and I will be moderating tonight's debate. We're on the set of the the Salt Lake Community College South Campus studio tonight, and we give a special thanks to our friends at the Salt Lake Community College for hosting us this evening. We also want to thank our sponsors for tonight, the Utah Republican Party and their chair, Derek Brown, along with his extraordinary staff, along with the Utah Young Republicans and their chair, Abdil Vasquez, who are also part of the action tonight with his leadership team, and they will also be framing many of the questions that we'll be asking our candidates tonight, as these young people really have an invested interest in what happens in this primary debate this evening. So again, welcome to all of you and to our candidates tonight. This will be a lively debate on substantive issues because we have a lot to talk about in the state of Utah and the United States of America. As we look at the rules, the ground rules for tonight will be as follows. We will have opening statements from each of the candidates. The order for the opening statements is determined by the finish at the Utah Republican Party convention earlier this spring. And so we'll go to those in just a moment. Once we have had opening statements from each of the candidates, we'll then go to a round of questioning, which will be determined by a random draw that was conducted earlier, and we'll rotate as we move that through the evening tonight. So again, we welcome all of you who are participating. This is an important time to have an elevated conversation on critical issues for our country and for the 4th District here in the great state of Utah. So let us begin. As I mentioned, the order for opening statements determined by the convention finish order. And so we will begin tonight with Kim Coleman. You have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you, Boyd. I also echo the thanks for the organization of this event tonight. I'm Kim Coleman. CD4 means the world to me. I've lived here, worked here, I've raised my family here. I even organized hundreds of parents to build a school of choice here. My roots grow deep in this community. As I've gone around campaigning in this last year, there seems to be two main questions people ask me. Are you a real conservative, and can you win? I have 6 years of constitutional conservative votes straight across the board that prove that I stick to my conservative constitutional principles, and Twitter can fact check that. Can I win? I've won 4 elections so far in CD4. 3 to the Utah State House of Representatives. I won that race being outspent, and I won against an incumbent. Now, I look forward to winning the 6th election and taking the seat back in November.
All right, thank you. And as a rule tonight, we're all going to go on a first-name basis after opening statements. But finishing second at the convention was Burgess Owens. Mr. Owens,
Thank you very much. Next. I, too, am thankful so much for everybody's put this together, for our opportunity to share some thoughts with you. For everybody's listening, and no matter what side of the aisle we're on, what part of the side of the Republican Party we're on, we all want the same thing at this particular time. We want unity. We want harmony. We want a sense of safety. And my campaign is based on the 4 tenets that's made our country great. The 4 tenets that define conservatism, that actually opens the gateway to anybody who wants to be part of the middle class. And that's head, heart, hands, and home. Very simple, something you can teach your kids tonight. Education, faith, industry, and family. When we come down and understand what it really takes and what's going to make our country come back strong, educating ourselves so we can think outside the box. Faith has to be there, because if not, evil is remaining. Industry, we all know how it is now, not to be able to go out and produce. We're a country of producers, a country of meritocracy. Last but not least, our greatest legacy will be our family. Let's make our family work and our country work, following behind it for sure.
Thank you. Next, JayMac McFarland.
Well, thank you, Boyd, and thank you to the Utah GOP and the Young Republicans for this incredible event, and thank you for watching. If you're watching tonight, that tells me that you're invested in the process, and you still believe what I believe, and that's the power of one person, and who we choose is important. And, you know, the number one question I get when I'm out campaigning is, why would you leave KSL News Radio after 9 years to jump into the madness and the mayhem of politics? And my answer is always the same. I did it for my kids, and I did it for your kids. We have a government right now that is shut down because we continue to send extremes to Washington. And there ought to be a discernible difference between children on the playground and people who are in our sacred legislative halls. We have got to turn the ship around for the sake of our children. We have handed them trillions of dollars in debt. We are handing them dysfunction. And I decided that I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't jump in and try and make a difference and turn that ship around.
Thank you. And finally, we'll go to Trent Christensen, your opening statement.
Thank you, Boyd. We have a Pelosi problem. Nancy Pelosi and her yes men, Ben Pelosi McAdams, and the D.C. Democrats have turned this country into something that's barely recognizable. And they have purposely stalled our economic recovery. If we're going to save our country, we need to fire Nancy Pelosi by beating Ben McAdams. And I'm the man to do it. But after we fire Pelosi, then what? Then we have an economy to fix. I am a proven job creator. I spent the last 10 years helping small businesses and nonprofits grow and create jobs, 30,000 jobs right here in Utah. I know how to do it, and I can do it again for you. But then what? We get the economy going, we get taxes low, we get spending down, then what? I have an idea, a bold, cutting-edge idea that's as old Glory herself. After I'm done serving you, my neighbors, my state, and my country, I'll come home. Congressman for life is not my goal. Saving our country is my goal. And with your help, we can fire Pelosi, beat Ben McAdams, fix our economy, and take our country back. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to all of you for those opening statements. We will now go, the order will be done by a random draw, and then we will rotate each round thereafter. So for this round, the order is Burgess, Jay, Trent, and then Kim. And we will go first names the rest of the way. We're done with all the formalities now. This would not be a Republican debate if we did not begin with the proper question. What is the proper role of the federal government? Burgess.
To get out of the way of we the people. What's made our country great and what's so unique about who we are is we have the most robust middle class in any place in the history of mankind. Based on those four tenets I just gave you, that's a class that is actually the most humble, the most empathetic, the most loving, the most serving, and the most thinking outside the box. It's up to the federal government to get out of the way, allow us to be creative, let us to think outside the box, take our risk, and let us keep the money that we are actually earning so we can put back into the areas that we need to do to continue that growth. So at the end of the day, what can the government do? Allow us to, again, the idea of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, protect those things and allow us, we the people, to do what we do best. And that's grow, prosper, and serve each other.
Jay.
You know, I love this question because I think a lot of people are very confused about the role of the federal government. They think their job is to run everything. But we have to think back that we are actually the United States of America. The states gave up a small amount of authority to the federal government to do only those things that the federal government can do. Those are defined in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And the 10th Amendment makes clear that anything not specifically mentioned in the Constitution for the federal government is reserved for the states. And we have forgotten the proper role of the federal government. That's why we have trillions of dollars in debt. That's why we have a bloated federal government. That's why we can't figure out health care, because anytime the government gets involved, they strip competition and market forces out of the equation. We need to go back to the power and the sovereignty of the states, and it will be my goal in Congress to carve back as much authority as I can from the federal government for the state of Utah.
Trent.
Thank you, Boyd. My signs say Citizen Trent. If you see them on the side of the road, if you see the billboards, it says Citizen Trent. And I've gotten asked that several times while I've been campaigning, interviewing. Why Citizen Trent? Because I think that in this country, the citizens are the sovereigns. We are not subject to anyone. Not to a king, not to a president, not to a Congress, not to the political elites back in D.C., not to anyone. We, the people, need to make a comeback. Congress has lost its American way, and we, the people, need to get in the game to change that. And if we don't, we'll have the same problems that we've had before. The role of government is to help us live the American dream. Let me ask you a question. If it were impossible for you to fail, what would you do? What would you do with your career, with your family, with your marriage, with your church, with anything? If it was impossible for you to fail, that is the definition of conservatism. That is what I want to create in government by getting government on the side of the people again, by reinstilling the concept of we the people. And once you reinstill that concept and you go with the Constitution and you go with what it says in the 10th Amendment, we can live the American dream the way you define it. Thank you.
And finally, Kim, proper role of the federal government.
Thank you, Boyd. I want to echo what my opponents have said here tonight and add a little bit to that. The role of the federal government is to protect and preserve our constitutional liberties as enshrined in our Constitution. Now, our Congress and our federal government has come out of balance. And while these things are true, what is the role even of the legislative branch? For far too long, the Congress has abdicated its role of legislating and representing the people in Congress, while the federal agencies, the unelected bureaucrats, have become far more powerful. This is an existential threat to freedom. When we are not maintaining balance, we are not affecting a check on the ability of government to grow and the potential for tyranny, then we have a broken government. My role in Congress would be to reinstate that balance, to do what I can to push back on the executive branch and those unelected bureaucrats so that we can preserve our freedoms.
Following up to that question, and this one will begin with Jay, if you do believe that the federal government has overreached, that the regulatory regime of over 80,000 pages in the Federal Registry is crippling business and hurting Utah 4th Congressional District families, what will you do in Congress to roll back regulation and things that are impacting Utah families?
Another great question. I think it's important to realize as a freshman congressman, I'm not going to have a lot of authority unless I can change hearts and minds and unless I can build coalitions. The person that we choose to send back east has to be somebody who can articulate a conservative message in such a way that people will look at that message and they'll go, you know what, I never thought of it that way. We are acting as though we can just force our will upon Congress. We're acting as though all we have to do is go back there somehow with a hammer and everyone will change their mind and suddenly go along with us. We have to find like-minded people, but that's not enough. We have to choose elected people who can actually articulate the message and bring people into conservatism. The numbers of conservatives who self-identify as conservatives nationally right now, it's at its lowest number ever. And unless we recruit, unless we expand our tent, unless we reach out to the middle and try and bring them in, we're not going to be able to change anything.
Trent.
Your question was actually about regulations. So let me answer that question. Fortunately, we have the greatest single regulation cutter ever in the history of America, and his name is Donald Trump. President Trump has cut more regulations than any president, including Ronald Reagan, ever. We could go down the list right now. It would take too long. But all you need to do, if you're looking for like-minded people, is align with the administration who is saying enough. These regulations, they kill small businesses. These regulations, they kill productivity in our country. And so as long as we can support our president in his efforts to continue to cut these regulations, we'll have success. But beyond that, we need to take responsibility. Do you know why federal bureaucrats have so much power? It's because Congress has abdicated that power, just given it up. They don't want to deal with it because Congress people don't want to take hard votes, because then they have to come back and face you and explain why they took those hard votes. And so whenever one of these regulations come up, they say, well, let's let the executive branch handle that. Not me. I will take responsibility in Congress. With the committees that I'm on, I will oversee those federal bureaucracies, and I will not let those regulations pass unless they are in the benefit and interest of the American people.
And Kim.
Thank you. I've been one of those people who have cast those votes, who has sponsored legislation to roll back regulations, to resist and push back on new proposed regulations. I've done it in the auto industry, in consumer products, and with businesses and occupational licensing. I have formed coalitions and been a part of coalitions to do this very thing, working hand in hand with community leaders, with business leaders, with citizens, and working in our legislature to actually roll back regulations, to actually vote against those regulations. And I am happy to go back to the people and tell them that I did this for them. Utah has had a very poor ranking for professional and occupational licensing. I've sponsored legislation to make it more free to earn a living in Utah. I've done this for 6 years. I have votes across the board. I will take that to Congress. I'm not afraid to do it.
And finally, Burgess.
We already know what it looks like to cut regulations. We have a president who's done it very well. Within 3 years, we got the lowest unemployment for blacks, Hispanics, Asians, women, veterans, teens. And one thing that we're excited about, a 400% increase in black business ownership, where people can finally pursue their dreams and have the hope and know that they can finally not only make things happen, but keep the income they have. What it comes down to, we need to get a house, guys. We need to get the house back. We have an opportunity to get a new group of people like myself, across the country that are going to take the lead of our president and care more about making sure that we get the power back to the people versus being career politicians. I've already reached out to many of those across the country. I'm calling the SEAL team. We're going to disrupt what's happening in the past, a brand new start, something that all Republicans can truly finally be proud of, because we can also help within that process get some backbone in the Senate. Between a House controlled by good conservatives, a Senate with more backbone, and a president who understands how to make this country work, we'll be just fine. We'll bring our country, truly make it great again for sure.
All right, this next round will be 2-minute. These are 2-minute answers this round. And obviously many of those watching tonight are concerned about the impact of the pandemic and the coronavirus. And so I want to ask each of you, one, how would you rate the federal government's response to the coronavirus, in particularly as it relates to spending? What did they do? Did they do it right? And then what would you do moving forward as a member of Congress? So again, rate the federal government's response, spending votes in particular, and what you propose moving forward. And Trent, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Boyd. I think the federal government has done an excellent job. There was really no playbook for this epidemic, and the work that the federal government did in ramping up and getting ready for this was admirable. I think President Obama left our epidemic readiness in the same state that he left our military readiness, which is terrible. And so President Trump, he built a good team around him. He listened to that team. He took their advice, and they had a good response. They still are having a good response. And by that, I mean they've responded to the health crisis, and now it's time to respond to the economic crisis. You can't have one without the other, because if we lose those jobs, if that economy goes down, if we lose small business, we lose the backbone of America. And our president understands that, and he's built a team around him to help him keep them in business. Now, when I say small business, I mean any small business owner, 500 employees or less. Did you know that 65% of Americans work for a small business? 65% of us work for a small business, and so many of us, mothers, fathers, can't go to work anymore. Small business owners that have poured blood, sweat, and tears into their small business through no fault of their own are asked to close their doors. So do I support the spending that happened from the federal government? Absolutely. This is not like the 2008 stimulus. Back then you had banks that were acting badly, and we bailed them out. These are small business owners, moms and dads, who are trying to make a living, trying to live the American dream, and through no fault of their own had to shut down. So yeah, we had to support them, we had to help them. And the PPP worked, as we just saw on this last weekend. We were supposed to have a huge job loss, but instead, we gained 2.5 million jobs in this country. You know where it didn't gain jobs? Blue states. Cities like New York, DC, and Boston, they lost jobs. Why? Because they're not as committed to the small business owners of their cities and their states like we are here in Utah and like the federal government is and like Donald Trump is. So moving forward, several policy prescriptions that I would do right now and in the future. But the biggest is to say there are states that are still holding out. They want a bailout of your money before they open their states. I would tie any future spending to making sure those states are 100% open. And if they don't open, they don't get the money.
Kim.
Thank you. Prior to the COVID pandemic, we were experiencing the greatest peacetime economy in known history, and that was due to a lot of the decisions by President Trump as well as a Republican tax cut. All of these things converged to make a fantastic economy. Utah's been a beneficiary of that. Well, Utah does it right as well. And I've been on the side of creating or helping to make sure that our economy is great in the state of Utah. So I agree with some of the things that have been stated. We did things mainly conservatively, but as long as we have to negotiate a stimulus plan with the left, with the Democrats in the House, we're going to get a bunch of junk in a bill. So we need to start with regaining the House majority for Republicans so that we have a better negotiating point. One of the things that I would do is suspend payroll taxes through the end of the year. That would result in a 7.5% income increase for people. And the best things to aid our recovery are the things that we know as Republicans and conservatives. It's better tax policy. It's better regulatory frameworks. It's putting America first, putting our jobs first, our businesses first. And as has been said, I have committed for weeks now. I have been touting no red state bailout of blue states. One of President Trump's closest economic policy advisors is Stephen Moore. He asked to join my team, and it's been great to have his insights on this recovery, including these things that I've mentioned. We know how to do this. Republicans do this well. The role of government is getting out of the way, but providing the firm regulatory and tax framework that encourages those jobs, brings jobs back to our shores, and keeping our economy straight. I've been on the side of doing this in the Utah legislature. Right now we're undergoing budget cuts. I've done this. I've voted for favorable policy in the State House. I'll take that to Congress.
Burgess.
I think that the way that President Trump handled this was the best he could have ever handled it. We had an enemy. We had no idea what that enemy looks like, what the real danger was. We thought 2 million people based on the experts. So he did something that shows how much he loves American people. He shut down the government, an economy that he had built to the greatest heights we've ever seen before. He's also the president who understood, once he understood the enemy, that the next most important thing is to save lives by saving our economy, to get us going again, and do what we do best. We are people of industry. That's what we do. The great thing that's going to come out of this whole process is that we can now have conversations. It's been stated before, there are people that actually do not want us to win. There are people who actually look at their power based on the misery of we the people. And it's nice to see that we can finally have conversations with our Democratic friends that are business owners, with our small business owners that are black-owned, that now see what it is. We're not talking hypothetical anymore. We used to talk about the downside of ideology that's been against us. We don't have to do that anymore. We can say, guys, look, at the last 3 months, what happens when you give leftists too much power? They abuse it. When you look at what they try to do in terms of not only shutting down business and making a decision on what's important for the rest of us, and then opening up the doors in these democratic cities, opening up the doors and allowing thugs to come through and destroy the business infrastructure. Our middle class is at risk. Our middle class is being attacked. Our middle class is driven by small business owners. Those are the true new heroes. Those are the front line that we're going to have to really point out and think when we get this economy back. At the end of the day, we have a president who understands that. All we need to do now is have a House that backs him up, no games, and let's get all these issues that we've been working toward for a long, long time that haven't been done because we've had to work through elitists to try to get things accomplished. We can win this battle, and I look forward to being on the other side of this.
And 2 minutes to JayMac to finish up.
Well, again, this is a very difficult time, as all of my colleagues have mentioned. The balancing act that our government has had to go through to balance lives with livelihoods, how many presidents have ever had to deal with that equation? How many legislatures have ever had to deal with that equation? There's not a lot, and we will look back on this time in history and we will ask questions about whether or not we did it right. And I think the federal government did a lot right, but that was the entire federal government working together. They all had to come together to make the PPP happen. And the PPP loans, by the way, are one of the biggest difference makers that could have ever happened in our government. And normally I'm against spending. One of the reasons why I left my job and decided to run for Congress is because I do not want to hand trillions of debt to my grandchildren. But in this case, I didn't see any other course of action, and neither did our federal government. But only half of that money has been distributed so far. And I saw a frightening statistic yesterday. Over 100,000 businesses so far have closed down for good nationally. In the state of Utah, the Utah Restaurant Association says 40% of restaurants may never open again. So we can't act like we're done. We have a lot more to do. And I'm worried that we will sit back and watch and wait a little bit too long. So if it were me, I would be rallying to get more stimulus now, and I would be avoiding the political traps that are out there, because if we can't get things done because we are so political on one side or the other, or we can't stand or even talk to the other side, we're going to watch the progress disappear, because whether we like it or not, the current makeup of our government has people who disagree. We have to be able to function in that environment.
All right. Next question will be 1 minute. And this question in particular is framed by our young Republicans. Abdil and his team have put together some great questions, and the young people are worried about the partisanship and the divide, particularly in Congress. The leadership quality for the 21st century is being able to find allies and build alliances. So when you go back to Congress, I want you to identify who is one of your allies who is already in the House or the Senate going to be? Who will be a strong ally for you? And then I also want you to talk about someone from the other side of the aisle who you think you can build into someone who is an alliance on a particular issue. So allies and alliances. Allies on the Republican side, alliances with someone on the Democratic side. And this question we will begin with Kim.
Okay. Alliances, I would start with some of the people who are supporting my race right now, some people that I would view as mentors when I go to Congress. They include people like Congressman Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, who's now President Trump's chief of staff, Andy Biggs, a number of people like that who are supporting my race. This would be my tribe. It's the conservative wing of the Congress and the Republican House of Representatives. And I have a record of doing that just by being in the Utah House of Representatives. I'm going to pick a state lawmaker. I'm going to pick Senator Jim DeBackus. When it comes to reaching across the aisle, that is a long aisle between me and Senator Jim DeBackus. But I valued listening to him and trying to understand him. And we sponsored a bill protecting campus free speech and civil rights together. I can do it. I've reached across the aisle when it matters. But there's a whole lot I will not compromise on.
Burgess.
I have a lot of respect for our legislators who have been elected from here in Utah. They share the values that I share. They have the courage to fight the fight. That's John Curtis, that's Chris Stewart, of course Mike Lee. In terms of the other side, that's what I have to find out when I get there, because at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind, guys, there are people who literally are trying to bring misery on our people. When I say that, understand there's people who actually legislate that policies that leave 75% of the black boys in the state of California not being able to read and write. There are people who vote to have abortionists that just go wild. So we have to understand there's values we have to share, and I don't care what party that is, by the way. As long as we share the same values of head, heart, hands at home, then we can talk about anything and agree to disagree until we finally find a solution that gives us our freedom and gives us back to the American way. Anyone who fights against head, heart, hands at home have very little to talk about. Make them elect and bring other people to the plate, the Democrats, so that we can finally have a conversation, because they do want to sit at the table for sure.
JayMac.
Well, I think we're very lucky in Utah with our Utah Coalition. I would be proud to work with any of them to help pass legislation. But we do have to recognize that we are a divided country, and we have to reach across the aisle. I'll be honest with you. No names jump off to the top of my head when it comes to which Democrat would I choose to build a coalition with. I think you have to go there with an open mind, and I think that what we're missing is a skill set that we listen first and we find out what the needs and concerns are. We offer up our ideas. We listen to the other side's ideas. And we're not going to build any coalitions if we just call the other side evil, if we just call them names, if we mock them, if we say, well, if you agree with 90% of what I say, then I'll work with you. These are people who have been elected. They have constituents who have sent them to represent their viewpoints and their ideas. We ought to respect them as Americans first, and respect that we can disagree with each other, but still call each other a patriot.
And finally to Trent.
The highest form of respect is to negotiate hard. I'm not going to take it easy on the other side. I'm not going to take it easy on them because they disagree with me 90% of the time. I will give them the respect of negotiating based on my values and my principles, and my bold ideas persuasively maintained will bring them to the table, not just a promise to listen to them. Now, who would I support? Who would support me the most? There's a man named Kevin McCarthy, and when I win this election and beat Ben McAdams, Kevin McCarthy will become the Speaker of the House instead of Nancy Pelosi, and he'll be grateful for the help we gave him in Utah. He will become our ally. I model my policy making after Senator Hatch. Some of the biggest, most important bills in our history were passed by Senator Hatch and Ted Kennedy. They fought like cats and dogs, but on the important issues, they came together and passed those even under Bill Clinton. bills like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. They work together. And I can work with people on the other side. In fact, I'd love to work with Tulsi Gabbard. She was the only sane Democrat on that stage, if you can call the Democrats sane. She was the only presidential candidate that I could listen to and say, yeah, she might have a good point. Those are the people I would work with. Kevin McCarthy's going to be grateful we win the seat when we make him Speaker of the House.
All right, we're going to stay with the same order for just a 30-second question. Recently, the House has passed the ability for members to vote remotely. Do you support that? Why or why not? Just 30 seconds, so we'll start again with Kim.
I do not support that. Our American way is to go together and deliberate on ideas. Now, if Ben McAdams does not want to go cast his vote while the rest of us have had to go to work, I'll take his vote card.
Very good. Burgess.
Very good. Very well said, Kim. We're elected to be essential. We're elected to go to work. We're elected to be leaders. We see the front line has made our country work over this last few months, and we applaud them. They're putting themselves in the front of danger so to make sure that our economy grows. Why can't we do that as congressmen? I think personally it's a very cowardly act not to show up and do your work and do your job. Everybody understands if you're an entrepreneur at all, you understand how to make things happen, how to tweak the opportunities to show up and do your job. So I definitely do not agree with that, and I think it's going to come back to bite these folks who decided to stay home instead of going to work like everybody else is.
JayMac.
Well, I'm going to differ with my colleagues here. I think our elected officials spend too much time in Washington and not enough time in the state. I think that you can do your job and you can vote, and yeah, you can spend time in Washington. But I think about the deficit. I think about how many federal dollars could be saved by voting remotely. We don't have to be back there for half of the year. We can change that and still have our voices heard, and I think more of Utahns' voices would be heard in the process.
And Trent.
We've had a discussion about essential versus non-essential workers. I think if they really go through with this, if there was ever any question before, Congress would become absolutely non-essential. It has nothing to do with the national debt. It has nothing to do with the national deficit. If you're going to do the work of Congress, be like an entrepreneur. If you've ever met an entrepreneur, you'll know they work 72 hours a day. They put in the work day and night to make their American dream come true. Why should Congress be any different? Go to Congress, do the work of the people, put in the hard work, go to your meetings, don't slough off, do the job, and represent the American people.
All right, we'll move on to our next round. We're about to the halfway point, so we're going to shift gears just a little bit here. So we will start with Burgess on this round. And the question, I think, is an important one in terms of how you look at the job you are running for, what it means, and where you will go. And so the question is, how will you make a difference in the community of the 4th District if after June 30th you lose and are no longer a candidate running for Congress? So how will you make a difference if you lose? Start with Burgess.
First of all, I will support whatever candidate we have because we have to get Ben McAdams out. The second thing is I've been fortunate over time to understand what drives me. I happen to have, for those who understand love languages, I love to serve. And for those who have followed sports or part of sports, I love to hustle. So now that I've been able to come out of my little bit of a niche of working strictly with kids, at-risk kids, and begin to see there's a bigger picture, more citizens here that I can get to know and work with, I am all in to serve the 4th District any way I can. I love to serve. I love to meet. I love to encourage. And the most important thing I can do is let people know this too shall pass. We're going to win this and come out on the other end a much better country, a much closer country, a most harmonious country, and one that our kids will be proud of to see us make the process and make it through with.
JayMac.
Well, one of the questions we asked when we started our campaign is, can we make a difference as we campaign? So my question has never been, when will I start making a difference? We decided that from day one we would try and promote unity, that we would try and reduce hatred, that we would try and bring people together. I've said it before, we have a vacuum of leadership when it comes to unification. I think if you look back at all of the greatest leaders of this country, you will see leaders who have sought to unify. That has been my goal, to get people to start looking at fellow Americans as patriots, regardless of whether they agree with you or not. That should be the starting point. And by the way, that's what George Washington asked for in his farewell address. He pleaded with us, he begged us to not fall into such a level of partisanship, that we are so divided, that we hate each other, that we disregard others' opinions because we are part of a party. instead of coming together first as Americans. That is my goal, and I will continue that goal after this campaign, regardless of what happens.
Trent.
I would absolutely support anybody on this stage to beat Ben McAdams. In 2012, I raised $90 million to help Mitt Romney defeat Barack Obama and stop the liberal agenda, and I would do that for anyone on this stage. Raise your money, knock your doors, put up your signs, whatever it takes. But I would also do what I've already been doing, which is to help small businesses. I'm the president and CEO of VentureCapital.org. We help first-time entrepreneurs start their businesses and create jobs. I'm on the board of the Suazo Business Center. We help minorities start businesses and create jobs. I served with Zions Bank. I was over a $1.4 million budget to help Utah entrepreneurs start businesses and create jobs. It's what I do. There are people like Nina Pearson, who started the Rebel House Cycling Club in Salt Lake. She needs our help. There are people like Dave Morocco and Jeanette Morocco that have a franchise of 5 gyms all throughout the district, actually. They need our help. And they're not going to get that help with Ben McAdams in Congress. So whoever wins needs to win the seat all the way, needs to win in the general, and I'm committed to that.
And finally, Kim.
Thank you. The question kind of assumes that there's a starting point to service. I'm not promising to go to Congress to start something and to do something there that I haven't already been doing. I have a grassroots army on the ground that exists because I've been in the trenches with the citizens, again, being rooted in our community, shoulder to shoulder, and fighting our battles to improve our community, to resist adversity in our communities. It's something that I've always done. I don't think anything changes for me if I'm not elected. I will continue to do what I've always done. I've started neighborhood watches, served on the PTA, organized hundreds of families to create a charter school in our community. Again, serving in our part-time citizen legislature. I have shown up when it's been 4 citizens trying to organize against Olympia Hills, and then showing up when it's 1,000 people organized in the Harriman Gym. This has been my life. I've always been involved in the Republican Party in every capacity. I've been involved in the community in so many ways. Nothing changes for me. I continue to serve.
All right, this next round will be a 2-minute round. We'll have 2 minute per answer here, and JayMac, you will be first on this round. With the tragic death of George Floyd, there has been much unrest in Utah and around the country. And tell us, what is the role of a member of Congress as it relates to the wedge issues of the day? What is the role of a member of Congress when it relates to wedge issues, issues of race, of prejudice, criminal justice? Give us your vision for what that might look like if you were on the floor of the House of Representatives.
It's a very thoughtful question. I believe to a great extent that local authorities should be deciding how they are policed and how their citizenry are taken care of. I believe that that is a role for states, as we've talked tonight about the difference between the job of the state and the job of the federal government. There are things that the Congress can do. They're talking about adding funding for what certain roles, like I'm sorry, I've lost my voice a little bit here. I've heard them talking about banning chokeholds. I think that should be left to the states. I've heard them talking about getting cameras for everybody, police body cameras. I think all of that needs to be left on a state level. I really think what we need on a federal level right now is quite simply somebody to speak in a way that calms and eases the fears of all sides of this equation. Right now, we have a lot of divisive language out there. We have a lot of people who are using this. A wedge issue is, by design, something that is used to get personal power, I believe, and to fire up your base. And I believe that the most underutilized power that any member of Congress has, or that a president has, is the bully pulpit, the ability to speak peace to the mind of Americans. And that's not happening right now. And I think that all of Congress bears some responsibility for that. And so my hope is that cooler minds can prevail. I hope that this becomes a banner moment in our society where we can look back and we can say, we made a difference. We listened, we heard, and we became more united as a country. Are we going to be more united because of the actions of Congress or not? That's my question.
Trent, 2 minutes.
Thank you. There is a truly disturbing trend that's coming out of this. The death of George Floyd was despicable, and the people that carried it out can and will be held accountable. But what we're seeing now is people using it for propaganda. It started in LA, and it's even reached here. It's all across the country. And they keep saying, defund the police. And it comes from a mistaken notion. It comes from a notion that somehow we have systemic violence and that the police, systemic racism in this country, and that the police are the enforcers of that systemic racism. Now, I didn't go to a liberal university, so I don't know much about that, but this I know. We need our police. We need our men and women in uniform, and we need to support them. The theory is that if we defund the police and get them off the street, then it will stop the violence, and it couldn't be more wrong. We need to give them the support, the training, the tools to get out in the community and make the difference that they want to make. Listen, nobody hates a bad cop like a good cop. And if you give them the funding that they need to do the training and have the tools necessary, they can keep the peace. One of the things that I felt very encouraged by was the response here in Salt Lake. We had some difficulties that first Saturday night, but it wasn't like the rest of the nation, was it, after that? It was peaceful here. And a lot of that goes to the credit of the people, the men and women in uniform, because they had the funding and the support of the public to do their jobs. Now, I'd support Senator Tim Scott out of South Carolina. He has legislation right now helping with this movement, helping to say, no, we're not going to defund the police. In fact, there's some things from the federal level that we can actually do to help our police. But by far and large, we should be leaving it to the states to decide how we do that. But one thing that a congressperson can do is be a leader. Sometimes it takes rhetoric. Sometimes it takes putting on a mask and walking outside and joining a protest. And we've seen that kind of leadership in this state, and I think we need more of it. Now, I don't know what we expected. We bottled people up for 2.5 months, and then this happens. People are unemployed. People can't feed their kids. And then this happens. Yes, people are going to riot. But if we can get people back to work, we will save lives. Opening the economy, saving jobs will save lives. Thank you.
Kim.
Thank you. Yesterday, we buried George Floyd. I join my fellow Americans and much of the world in just feeling so awful about the horrific things that we saw on our television screens. We want swift justice for the criminals who did this to George. And I've been serving on our Utah Legislative Committee for Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement, where we frequently try to balance police authority with due process and the rights of citizens. I echo that this is not a role of the federal government. This is a role for local law enforcement. But let's understand wedge issues. There are issues that wedge our communities, but there are wedge issues that are tactical. They are meant to divide. They are meant to polarize. They are meant to stoke hate. Let's not confuse peaceful protest with lawless looters.
Thanks, Kim. Burgess.
I think we experienced a couple times that shows the unity that we have in this country when things are going bad. When we saw that on camera what happened to George Floyd, all of our country came together. We all understood the evil that was happening there. We knew that was wrong. There was no question about it. That could have been a moment in which we really came together as a country and said, this is the way we should handle this. Now, how can we make it better? Let's figure out a way. We just had a funeral yesterday that I tuned into. That should have been another moment that we all unify together and say, we want to make sure that we show that we do care about each other's lives. We have to understand also, well, let me just say this, in terms of how we're going to pull this together, I want to make a point that I was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. For the last few years, I've actually started and founded an organization called a nonprofit for a second chance for youth, helping young boys and girls to come out of the juvenile system to have a second chance to come back and be producers. It's the combination of having a service-oriented organization, police, and the young people who've never been really taught how to trust, to bring them together, develop soft, safe havens where they can truly, in a police force, to have places where people are at risk, people are trying to break out of trafficking, can come and communicate and get a chance to start over without the threat of having to go to jail. Those are little things we can do, but the most important thing we do as congressmen is educate our people. We are a country based on Judeo-Christian values. The reason why we are where we are today, the best nation in the history of the world to look at each other from inside out versus outside in, is because of those values. From the very beginning, we've had an enemy. That enemy is against those values, and we see it every single day. I call it evil, because it's all about destruction, it's misery, and it's taking advantage of people to actually get power. We have to understand who that enemy is. We have to be honest. If we don't let that happen, guys, what happened to my small community, a great community in the 60s, a fantastic middle-class community, 56% of us, will happen to our nation. If we're not aware that there's evil coming at us, we have to point it out. And for those we can get together with, like a Gabby Gilbert, Tolbert, I totally agree. There are people we can talk about to get this thing done with.
All right, thank you. The next round will be 1 minute, 1 minute answers here, and we're going to shift gears and focus on, one of you will be taking on Ben McAdams, starting on the day after the 30th, and moving towards a first Tuesday in November battle. He is a Blue Dog Democrat. From political experience, everyone knows the first re-election of anyone in Congress is the hardest and most difficult to win. What is it that you bring uniquely to the battle against Representative McAdams that will help you in a November election? And Trent, we'll start with you.
Thank you. For the last 10 years, I've been creating jobs. For the last 9 years, Ben's been in Congress, or excuse me, he's been in politics. He's been in the Utah legislature. He was in the county government. He's in the Congress. Those are two very different aspects of life. And you need to ask yourself, if I need a plumber to fix some plumbing, do I go with someone with experience, or do I just pick anybody? If I need someone to fix my car, do I just go with anybody, or do I fix someone with experience? We are in an economic crisis right now. And the thing that sets me apart from anybody, frankly, on this stage, but also Ben, is that I have the experience to get the economy going again. Listen, I wouldn't actually say that Ben is a Blue Dog Democrat. I don't even know what that means. Ben is a Nancy Pelosi Democrat. Ben votes with Nancy 8 out of 10 times, and he's always there with her when she needs him. Voting for Ben is like giving Nancy a spare key to our state. We don't have representation right now. Nancy Pelosi has representation in our state. And that's what I bring. I will represent you. I will represent your values to Congress with my experience.
Kim.
Thank you. I've been fighting Ben McAdams for 6 years, and I'm not ready to stop that. Now, we are suffering the legacy of Ben McAdams in Salt Lake County, where I'm a resident, and we need to make sure Ben doesn't have one in Congress. We start with understanding the district. I understand the district. I've been working in the district. I know Ben. I know what he's about. I know what he's done. I know how he works, how he thinks. He had the choice, no matter how close he wants to get to the line between parties, he chose one side of it, and that's the side of the Democrats led by Nancy Pelosi in the Congress. Now, this is where it matters. We have a grassroots army. We've all been fighting for this district for a long time. We have the resources to beat him. We've broken all kinds of fundraising records for GOP candidates in the state. We have a massive army. We've got a sophistication level of our campaign, our tacticals, everything that is needed to go all the way and beat Ben McAdams.
Burgess.
It's real simple in my mind. I'm very fortunate to be fighting to serve a district that really represents America. Those four tenets I just talked about that I grew up in are the same tenets that resonate here. And all we have to do at the end of the day is show that our message beats Pelosi, Maxine Waters, and Schiff. Because 89% of the time, Ben McAdams votes for those guys. Again, I've heard that Ben is a good guy, but we're not looking to just good politicians are down and done. We don't need any more of those. We need people who are really going to fight and actually show up and show the difference of what the party, the leadership party of the Democratic Party, leadership of the Democrats have done to our country across the board. Anybody who trusts them, the same results. They've used, abused, and discard. And it doesn't change based on which Democrat we send in. We need to get the House back with strong, patriot conservatives who will fight the bullies, and call them out who they are, and work with those across the aisle who believe in those same tenets I just mentioned before.
And JayMac.
I think this is one of the most important questions that any Republican should be asking as they approach this primary. Which person on this floor can beat Ben McAdams? And I believe that you have to look at the makeup of Utah District 4 before you answer that question. Is it a hard right conservative district? Is it a moderately conservative district? It's represented by a Democrat, which is odd, but that should tell you that there is a lot of support from that side of the aisle. If you choose what I would label as somebody who is to the extreme right to go up against Ben McAdams, I believe that that person will lose because that doesn't represent what this district is made of. This district is more moderate, and they deserve leadership that can back that up. Ben McAdams, I've heard the same thing. He's a good guy. I think he's a good guy that just wants to be in Congress. Now, I'm a good guy that wants to go to Congress and fight for conservative values. And I can do so because I've engaged in a 9-year conversation with Utahns on KSL News Radio about the issues, and that brings me a broad level of middle of the road support.
All right, we're going to stay with this same order, 30-second round on this. If you are able to prevail in November, in January, you will be sworn in. Your first day in Congress, on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, what is the first bill or first issue you will tackle? 30 seconds. Trent.
The only issue that matters is jobs, jobs, and jobs. So to that end, I would make the Trump tax cuts permanent. I would stop runaway spending and discretionary spending, and I would vote to endorse a bill that says you cannot vote for these omnibus bills. These bills have to stand on their own so that we can have transparency with you, the voter, tell you what we're voting on so you don't go in blind. We need to fix the economy. We need to make sure that the small business owners have the resources they need. And we need to assess at that point, do we need another round of PPP? Have we lowered the unemployment rate enough to get people back to work? It's jobs, and I'm the one with the experience to do it.
Kim, first day in Congress.
Can I only get one? I would work with Senator Ben Sasse on protecting life for infants who have survived an abortion. It is a travesty of our time what has happened in those scenarios. I do agree with making those tax cuts permanent, and I would also I would lessen our dependency on countries like China that do not have our best interests in mind and that brought this upon the world.
Burgess.
First of all, I agree with everyone has said here in the next few minutes. Keep in mind, in order for us to protect life, living in pursuit of happiness, we need to be an educated people. Ignorant and free can never be. What the left has done is actually made our society a very ignorant society. So we can have discussions and topics like this, but if they don't understand it, they will continue to go with their emotions. We need to have a people that is, first of all, when we send our kids to colleges, they should come out loving our country, being able to produce. We should be in a position where those colleges, I don't care how long they've been around, if they're not giving us the right product, if they're failing us, we need to take our money back. We need to give them some criteria in terms of what we're looking for our country needs. Instead of importing talent, we should be building it here. If they're not doing it, we need to get our money back. One thing about the left, they love money and power. We take that away, they'll make some changes.
And JayMac.
Well, I think it totally depends on where we're at. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're still in a recession. So I agree that if we're still in that situation, then jobs and restoring businesses will be absolutely paramount. If we are somehow beyond that, we have to start asking the question, how do we pay down this debt? How do we not pass this debt on to our children and our grandchildren? My hope is that with the leadership that we have now, that the economy has recovered enough that we can get back to some of that original business.
Okay, we're going to go a couple of quick 30-second rounds. These are coming from our young Republicans. First, on the issue of the environment and global warming. Just a yes or no, do you believe global warming is real? And then based on whatever your answer is, what is the role of the federal government in dealing with it? Kim.
I believe there are some impacts that are human originated, but I do not think this is one of those wedge issues. I don't believe in it to the extent that the left would want to use it to suppress our economies and businesses, and we need to understand where some of that is coming from.
Burgess.
I believe that we have an impact, that we can, for instance, do things to make sure that the valley here has less pollution. But in terms of changing the global climate, that's something that God does. We have nothing to do with that. We just deal with it, and it's been the history of the world. It's always changing, and that's why they changed from global warming to global cooling, because they can never keep up either. So no, we have to understand we do have an impact. Just like we need to clean our house, we can clean our valley, we can clean our country, but the rest of the big picture is Heavenly Father's plan.
JayMac.
I absolutely believe it's real, but I think, as Kim pointed out, it's such a wedge issue. When you use the term, everybody closes their ears and they start going and they choose sides. I think that in order to provide real leadership, you have to focus on commonalities. So instead of trying to decide who caused it, can't we all focus on a couple of things? How about clean air? How about clean air in Salt Lake? How about clean water? How about energy independence? I think we can all agree on those three things and stop worrying if we created it and just start doing things that will reverse it just in case we did.
And to Trent.
I believe in good stewardship. I believe you leave something better than you found it. But I think a good example of what the left does with an issue like this is the Paris Climate Accord. Thank goodness that President Trump got us out of the Paris Climate Accord. Because yes, of course, we want clean air, clean water, but the Democrats use that to beat small business owners over the head, to shut down their businesses, and to imply such compliance costs that it's almost impossible to run a small business nowadays. So yeah, let's be good stewards, but let's put small business owners first. Let's put Americans first.
Okay, we're going to continue with the same order in this one more 30-second round. This is also from our young Republicans who you may not be surprised to know are worried about higher education, the cost of it, the rising cost of it, and the amount of debt that they're taking with them along with their diplomas at the end of the day. What is the role of the federal government in dealing with higher education? Kim.
I think the federal government should get out of education altogether. It's part of the problem. The federal government is part of the problem of the escalating cost of higher education. One day serving on our Higher Education Appropriations Committee, I asked the Commissioner of Higher Education a cost question, and he actually answered this. It would be unwise for the legislature to ask those kinds of questions. That's why we have deans and presidents. That was one of the most shocking moments of my time in the legislature. Not a role for federal government, but maybe an oversight role.
Burgess.
In terms of the higher education, there's no question. That is an area that we need to, first of all, have some accountability, have some transparency. The fact that we have young people leaving college now with tremendous debt and no way to get rid of it. They can go bankrupt and still will not be able to leave that behind like everything else. They can never get a second chance because that's the way the cartel is set up. You have a $40 billion endowment by Harvard University. Harvard University. Meanwhile, they're putting out people who hate our country. We need to have accountability. Again, if they're not giving a good product, we need to claw back income and give it to people who are giving us a good product. We need to put in place a parameters of what we need to have and have colleges tie in and deal with that.
JayMac.
I think that we have to realize that our current legislators, they don't understand the laws of unintended consequences. There is 8% inflation in the higher education system right now compared to the 1.5% the rest of the economy has. How can colleges be raising their prices by 8% annually? I'll tell you how. Every time college becomes unaffordable, Congress turns around and says, well, we'll just send more money their way. And so that takes away the market forces. Ask yourself a question. If there was never a student loan, could there be 8% inflation in college? Absolutely not. It wouldn't be able to be supported.
And to Trent.
Thank you. One thing I do not think we should ever consider is the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren plan of forgiving all student loans. That's a socialist giveaway that they want to do in order to just gain favor, but it would destroy the student loan industry. It would destroy the university across the country. I do not believe that those should be dischargeable in bankruptcy. Some people on the stage believe that. But what I do believe is that the free market forces can help this problem. And by that I mean there are other alternatives. It doesn't have to be a university education anymore. There's vocational schools. There's so many other ways in which you could use a 529 account to enhance your education. So I encourage the students of today to look for those free market opportunities, those other opportunities, and not get so in debt.
All right, we're going to go to one more question before we go to final statements in just a moment. Final question, we will begin with Burgess here. And one would expect in a Republican primary that there are many similarities amongst the four candidates on stage tonight. I think we've seen a lot of similarities tonight. And so what is the distinguishing difference that you bring to this campaign to win and to win the general election in November? What is the distinguishing trait or experience that you bring to this particular office? Burgess.
I was taught at 16 years old by my dad when I was integrating one of four black athletes in his high school. He told me how to deal with a bully. He says you run at him as fast as you can and hit him as hard as you can. I understand that we have a bully in the room. I understand we have an ideology. There are people in this country who do not love us, guys, and they take advantage of every situation to divide us. We need to have somebody who has the courage to stand up, call them for where they are, no matter what the color is, what the power base is, and then educate our nation to how we can all come together to get those type of people out and get new people in, no matter what party that might be of. What side it might be on. At the end of the day, good people on both sides can come together and have the same end game. Right now, we have to fight against those who do not have the end game that we have. We want our kids to have a better future. There are many people who want them to be miserable so they have more power. We need to understand that, run them as fast as we can, and as hard as we can.
JayMac.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think that the way you create change is you change hearts and minds. And I don't think you change anybody's hearts and minds with insults, attacks, or any other similar behavior. You change hearts and minds by making people think. Number one thing that people always said to me about my show is they said, you know, JayMac, I don't always agree with you, but I know how you got there. Or they would look at me and they'd say, I never thought of it that way. We need people who can convert people to conservatism, because believe it or not, conservatism requires conversion. Liberalism doesn't. Everybody understands tax the wealthy, give me free stuff. But conservatism requires somebody who can articulate that message and change hearts and minds. We should be expanding our tent. We're not going to grow our tent with bully-like tactics. It's just not going to happen. Nobody looks at somebody who's good at insults and says, oh, I'm going to go join your team. They have to be challenged intellectually, and you have to be able to back up what you say and back up what you believe, and I can.
Trent.
Thank you. I want to start by saying I'm actually incredibly impressed by this field, by my colleagues here today. The state of the Republican Party in this state is strong, and that's a good thing. Now, if I was to say what sets me apart, I got into this race late. I kept waiting and saying, well, I'm pretty sure someone eventually will get in that has a strong economic background, and I didn't see it. So my 14-year-old said, well, Dad, you always say that if you don't like something, you fix it. So I got in to fix it. That's my background, and it's what sets me apart. I believe that bold ideas, persuasively maintained, will win the day, regardless of who you're talking to. Whether it's the most liberal member of Congress or someone that already agrees with you, bold ideas will change the world. But you have to be able to persuasively maintain them. You have to understand the economy. You have to understand how jobs come and how they go. And you have to be passionate about doing the things that it will take to do on all the boring issues, on taxes, on regulations, and on spending, in order to help small business owners in this state reopen their doors and get moms and dads back to work. I'm passionate about this issue. I've been doing it for 10 years because I've seen what happens when someone lives the American dream, can open up their business again. That message will match up with Ben McAdams. The $90 million that I raised for Mitt Romney, I can do it again in this race, and I can represent you.
Kim Coleman.
I have a bold idea. Someone else had a bold idea called the Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, the best ideas when it comes to our government. Now, how I'm different from my colleagues here on the stage is that, once again, I'm rooted in this community. I have a record of working side by side with people in this community. We got in here early because we knew this fight was going to be hard, and we were going to build our army early, and we have one. We have the resources that it's going to take to beat Ben McAdams. Now, understanding the district is very important, and being a longtime resident of the district, I understand we're not a moderate district. We are a strong Republican district. We elect some of the most conservative people up and down the ballot in this district. We left almost 22,000 Republican votes on the table in 2018. It will not happen again. In 2018, I beat my Democratic opponent by almost 3 times the votes that we lost the seat by. We know how to win.
All right, it's come to that moment where you get to make the closing argument. This will, for many who have received their ballots already, this is your closing argument, your last chance to speak to them tonight. And again, this was by draw, and so we will begin with Burgess. Final statement.
Let me start off by saying President Reagan once said, freedom is but one generation away from extinction. We're looking at that as we speak, guys. You know, my dad was he was a proud World War II veteran. He left this country to go overseas to fight, even though things weren't perfect here, because he loved our country, loved what that Constitution, what that flag stands for. We're in a fight, and we have to decide whether we're going to fight or dance around with those who just hate our country. We've been dancing for decades. That's why when I started working with at-risk kids, Second Chance for Youth, I see the damage. I see the hopelessness. I see the trained process that goes when people are not given the right tools. And there are people that actually purposely do that so they can keep power. So no, there are folks that we have to understand are not at all on our page. Matter of fact, they will take our goodness and put it against us because they understand strategy. They'll take that and progressively continue to move to where our country loses our freedom and do not even understand what our rights are or what the Constitution even means. So we're in a position now that I think we can have conversations. And I love the fact that we could be unified, that we have a chance now to take to Congress someone who's a fighter, someone who will actually get out and, because I love my country so much, pay the price, do the work, reunify us, those of us across the board who believe in our nation, and then come back home and live the consequences. I'm asking you to vote for me. I'm asking you to give me an opportunity to serve you and make you, and I promise to make you proud that not only am I an American, I'm very proud to be a Utahn, and I'll spend the rest of my life here making sure that those words mean a lot not only to you but to me.
JayMac.
I'm very grateful for everyone here tonight. I know how difficult this is. Running for office, I didn't know beforehand what it would entail. I didn't know how much work it would take. I believe everybody here is an incredibly hard worker and will do everything in their power to fight for what they believe. But I also believe how you fight is as important as what you're fighting for. And I believe that if we compromise key moral character issues, if we become the very enemy that we despise in our tactics, in our actions, then we no longer hold the higher ground. And I believe that the United States is heading in a direction where our government will completely shut down because we're choosing people who cannot reason with each other. We're choosing people who cannot even look at each other. We saw the State of the Union address torn up. We see people attacking each other like children. There is only one thing that's going to change that, and that's if we change the people who we're sending. We need to send people who can reason with each other, who can talk to each other like adults. It doesn't have to be this way, my friends. It doesn't have to be. And that's why I left my job at KSL News Radio, because I believe that if we don't turn this ship around, that representation will die. Because representation is in place because we know we're going to disagree with each other. We have never been a country that we all agree on everything. We never will. And so if we're going to get these wheels of government turning again, then we have to choose differently. We have to look for leadership. We have to look for unifiers, not dividers. And that's what I represent. That's what distinguishes me here. And that's what I will continue to fight for, to turn this ship around before it's too late.
Trent, final statement.
Thank you. We live in the best country that God ever created, and the best state in that country. But you look around, and people are suffering. Our nation is hurting. Our economy is almost in ruin. Bad ideas can cripple an economy, but good ideas can revitalize it and put it back on track. With the right leadership and the right experience, we can put this country back on the track that it was in December of 2019, headed for all-time highs. But it takes the right vote. Voting for Ben McAdams will ensure that there's another 2 years of Nancy Pelosi tearing up speeches, disrupting what our president's trying to do to get this economy back on track, and making sure that we can't have the economy that we want. I believe in the American dream. When I was 6, my dad was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and in 10 years he couldn't walk, let alone work. And my mom, an immigrant to this country, she stepped up, and she was the breadwinner, and she took care of all of us, all 8 of us. And we succeeded because the American dream succeeds. And there are people today, disagree or agree, but there are people today that don't believe in the American dream and don't want you to believe in the American dream. But it works. And I will help put it back on track. I will make sure that you have a voice in Congress to make sure that you can get your job back, that you can keep your job. You can open your small business, and you can live that American dream. Now, we've heard a lot of people talk today about their strategy, about how to get into Congress. And all of us have a different strategy, and that's okay. But I'm the only one with an exit strategy. I don't want to serve in Congress for the rest of my life, and that should matter to you. Because if someone wants to serve in Congress for 40 years, well, then their name is Joe Biden. I want to serve in Congress for a maximum of 8 years because I can get it in and I can be effective on day one, and I can carry that effectiveness through 4 terms and get out. Come home. And I want to do that because I love working in this economy. I love working with entrepreneurs. I can help you achieve your dreams, achieve the American dream. Thank you.
And Kim.
Thank you. I've actually voted in support of congressional term limits. One of the other frequent questions people ask me is, how do we know if we vote for you, you won't go to D.C. and get lost? Now, there's 2 aspects to that question as I understand it. Sometimes that's your principles. How do we know you won't get lost in what you're about and what you campaign on? And how do we know you won't get lost from our community? We start with being tethered to the community. That's how you know first. I've been serving in this community. I am tethered. My roots are here. I can't go far. The community is why I am seeking this seat. The other side, the other question is on the principles. Once again, I have a strong voting record on principle. Recently, I was one of the few Republicans to vote against the tax reform. Got me some problems with some relationships. Every day, I'll vote on principle, and I'm not going to Congress to make lots of friends or get important assignments. I'm going to Congress to do the right thing for the people. I stay connected and rooted to my principles. I stay connected and rooted to my community. And that's why people know me. That's why people trust me, because they can see what I've done for 6 years, because they can find me so easily in social media. They can go to Kim for Utah and find me that for 6 years I've actually done the things that people are saying they will do tonight. I'm not promising to do something new by going to Congress. I am promising to continue my service in the community, fighting for conservative values, and it is a fight. We are looking for a fight. There are times that we can compromise, but let's be very, very clear. Our fight is not to move to the middle and meet somebody in the middle. Our fight is to decrease the numbers in Congress of the people who do not represent our home, our values, and who are not interested in protecting those constitutional freedoms that we hold dear. I ask for your vote.
Thanks to all of the candidates for being in the arena and engaging in an elevating dialogue that shows the Utah model always works best, that we can compete in the marketplace of ideas. Appreciate each of the candidates for being here tonight and being in this 4th Congressional District debate tonight. Special thanks to Salt Lake Community College South Campus for hosting us here in their studio, the Utah Republican Party and the Utah Young Republicans for their work on tonight's effort. And thank you for joining us on social media and on the internet. You are now an informed voter. The test is, will you vote and show up? Thanks again for engaging with us. Have a great evening.
Okay, guys.